Good morning. Woke. Are you awake? Did you have your coffee? Did you do what it takes to wake you up this morning? I hope you did. I did. I get up every morning. I exercise a little bit, something that helps me quite a bit. I do some kind of power walking in intervals. Uh, I stretch. I loosen my joints. I do it every morning. I have a routine every day, and I think it's critical. It does keep me awake. And to me, woke has it's just so misused. It's like uh, people are criticizing woke all the time to cut down to to attempt to nullify the what I want to say liberal perspective, okay, or what people call the far left perspective. It's about as far left as shit. Uh, However, there are some potent elements to it. It's just become a way of claiming victim status for yourself rather than acknowledging a more deserving others hold that status. Has gone from a virtue signal to a dog whistle. And so it's being used to try to condemn the opposite viewpoint of the alternate right. Now, the alternate right are not the true conservatives. There aren't many of those left. Not that they are essential, however, they were easier to deal with than these cretins on the alternate right side, which is not really conservatism. It's just insane. If you look at what the orange pus bag did in his 4 years, it wasn't very conservative. Some of it was very reactionary, like the Supreme Court justices he appointed did not reflect the people's legal wants, needs, and current perspectives. Did not reflect it. And so now we have all this ridiculous reactionary decisions that are being made because there's a 6-3 majority. So what it tells me is that the Supreme Court now people don't really like the Supreme Court anymore. At their lowest rating ever. So maybe its authority needs to be greatly demeaned and maybe given back to the circuit courts. Who knows? That's not my expertise. I'm not a judicial expert by any means. However, what's going on with this woke nonsense is pretty reactionary. They don't want to acknowledge uh, uh, gay people, bi people, the queer people, trans people. They don't want to acknowledge all those folks. They don't want them around. They really don't want same sex marriage, which has been legalized for quite a while now. And do you really care about that? Come on, how is that threatening to you? Well, I think a lot of them are afraid their children, grandchildren, maybe relatives might become queer, or they might be bi, or they might want to transition their gender. That's what it's about. A lot of it. The rest of it is like all these false claims about the far left. Like, listen to what the puss bag says. Talks about he claims communism, Marxism, and fascism in the same context, and they're not the same, despite what some of the supposed experts will tell you. That there's this close relationship between communism and fascism. Actually, there is one tenet, and that's state control. State control has been a characteristic of both ideologies. Now, the problem there is in that respect, we have really had watered down communism. We haven't had true communism. I'm not espousing communism right now, or even Marxism. I don't know enough about Marxism to espouse it. Now, if you want to learn more about Marxism, there's plenty of ways to do that, and you can do it all on YouTube. You can get a nice education and find out what Marxism really is. And Marxism has influenced many of the major economists in the world. It is a prevalent uh, influence on a lot of economic thinking. And the problem with economics boils down to the same things. Supply seems to be the big problem. That seems to be a bigger problem than demand. When there isn't a supply to meet the demand, there's a problem. And then prices go up. And then that's called inflation. And when the supply gets back in quantity, the prices stabilize. Sometimes they go down, but they usually stabilize because a lot of the supply people say, hey, here's our opportunity to increase our profit margin. And some of them are not paying more for their materials for the supply, paying about the same as they did before. So now they've doubled their profit. Okay, now other folks are paying a lot of money for their parts and supplies, things of that nature, so they have to increase their prices to have a profit. The problem is the profit margin itself. Now, people who have businesses, they want a high profit margin. When I had my businesses, I wanted a high profit margin. And, why? Well, for me, it was about I was attempting to create a business that would become a worker co-op. Because I'm not interested in corporate structure, things like that. I'm interested in creating more worker co-ops. I don't think that they need to be the only way to conduct business. There's always going to be, sole proprietors. There's always going to be those LLCs. There's always going to be those little X corps. There's always going to be individuals and small groups or partnerships of individuals that want to have businesses. I don't want to stop that. I mean, I think that's a good thing to have. And those people are our bread and butter for our economy, and we need them. And the problem is they're treated not as good as the big boys, meaning the large corporations. What small businesses need more of a break. They need more of a tax break. They need more of an incentive to grow and maintain their businesses and help when they need it. I mean, look at the debacle of the Paycheck Protection Plan. That was a debacle. Look at how many, and mostly conservatives, reactionaries, maggots, look at how many scammed it. Gosh, billions of dollars scammed. I mean, there were a couple of representatives that were in the couple $1 million apiece of their PPP loans. Now, some of these people gave the money back. Other people didn't. It was forgiven. They didn't have to pay it back. Okay, so you're going to do that? Let's go ahead and forgive small business loans. Let's go ahead and forgive the college debt, which should be completely forgiven. Forget the $10,000 mark. It should just be completely forgiven across the board unless somebody wants to pay it. Now, nobody's going to want to pay it hardly, but I think it would be more fair if it was done that way. And then people bellyache, well, look at these really rich people who, they got the $300,000 in debt or $150,000 in debt. That's right. Forgive all of it, and we know from the numbers that it goes back into our consumer society economics, and it actually helps the country rather than hurting the country. We know this. This needs to be done. And the fact that reactionary Supreme Court killed, the Biden loan forgiveness plan, which was a start, albeit not a very good one. However, it was a start. Now there is an impetus, and that's to get more progressives in Congress and in state legislatures. We need more and more progressives. Progressives need to dominate because progressives' agendas, for the most part, I mean, probably 80% of the time, reflect the wants and needs of our citizenry, and that's why they need to be in power. There was a weird poll or survey that came out a few days ago that said that when it comes to the economy, voters prefer Republicans. Republicans? What have Republicans done with the economy in the last 20 years? They messed it up bad. They messed it up horribly. Trump, I'm gonna eliminate the debt, blah blah blah. I'm gonna change all of this. This is all gonna be done, blah blah blah. No, $7.7 trillion more in the deficit, from Trump, because of Trump. Now, some of that was necessary. Okay, some of that was necessary, and what's being ignored here is money itself. The more I read about it, the more I learn about it, the more I like modern monetary theory. I don't know if all of it is possible to attain. It actually works because where does the money come from? The government makes the money. Well, does the government need taxes to make the money? No. They can make money whenever, how much ever they want. And this Powell guy, he needs to go. That son of a bitch needs to be gone out of the Federal Reserve. In fact, that whole thing needs to be restructured so it reflects the needs of the vast majority of our citizenry. And it doesn't. It's a piece of shit. and it needs to go away. Okay, so does Powell. Powell's an idiot. Okay, so inflation has gone down. Well, why has inflation gone down? Is that because the supply has increased and prices have not increased with the supply? Is that why it's gone down? It's, what is it now, 4%? It was what, 7 or 8%? Shit. That's nothing. In the 70s, like 75, and in that era, the inflation went up as high as 11%. The inflation of home mortgages was ridiculous. A lot of people couldn't afford to buy homes because the mortgage rate was so high. Well, there's another thing that needs to go away. The mortgage industry, I'm sorry, you don't like this because it sounds communist and socialist, but it needs to be nationalized so there isn't a high rate at all. In fact, it should be almost like a break even. Just the cost of administering the payments, and that's it. The rest of it needs to be based on the principal and not the interest. And that's what the problem is. And that's why that fucking industry has become commoditized. We don't need a commoditized real estate industry. We don't need that. We don't need our supply of homes and housing, rentals, whatever, to be commoditized. And that's what happened. And it is a travesty. It is a great tragedy. And it's one of the things I think is fundamentally wrong with our economy. If you take it out of the picture, things might be a little bit different. It might be a little bit better. Anyway, folks, I hope you tuned in, because as this morning I'm awake and I can't even do coffee right now because of medical situations, which is fine. I'm awake. I'm rolling along. I'm glad some of you have tuned in. I'm glad I have subscribers. Hit the subscribe button if you like what I'm saying. Comment. Tell me what you want me to cover for you. I can cover a lot. I read the news thoroughly from many different sources. I look at many different perspectives, and I just hope that you will be okay with the stuff that I cover, and maybe you'll subscribe. If you subscribe, it'll help me on YouTube. And this one won't be on my podcast. My podcast is going to come back. I've been going through an equipment upgrade. It's taken me quite a while because of my health situations, but it's going to happen. And I hope that you guys will tune in when the podcast is rejuvenated.